Hi, Shanoa. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Tricia.
I just want to jump right in. Many of us have a vision for how we think life is going to unfold. What happened for you when yours fell apart?
I was living in Miami and my boyfriend was from Montenegro. I was already in love with the country and the culture and I couldn't wait to visit. So when I finally went to visit, it was just spectacular. And I always knew I wanted to leave Miami, but I didn't know where I wanted to go. So I wasn't in a rush. But when we came back from vacation, I just didn't want to talk about my trip. So we agreed that we would go back the next summer to move there. And if it didn't work out business-wise, we could always just come back. So our first day of the move, we spent the day together in the capital and everything was just perfect. And then we went to the seacoast. Our friend gave us his condo for our first week of our trip because it was a summer vacation and then getting settled into a place in the fall. And it was just huge and right on the water. So we were trying to convince his parents to leave the capital that gets very hot like Rome in the summer to come join us the next day. And it was just perfect. It was the first day in my life up until then that I felt like everything was perfect. Everything was just aligned and I was so grateful. But unfortunately, I woke up in the morning and he did not. To find that he'd passed away in his sleep, it was a clot. And it's the last thing you think is going to happen when you're that young. And so as you can imagine, my life just spiraled. I always say that the Mayan calendar, like when they're saying the world's going to end in 2012, my world really did end because that was one life. And then there was a life after he passed away.
How old was he?
He was 41.
Oh, wow. That is so shocking.
And I was the most energetic person in the room.
Really?
Healthy, outgoing.
Okay, so take us back to that time. So, what happened immediately after that horrifying experience?
Immediately after, I was in shock because it was complicated. It's not just a matter of grief. It was the surprise of waking up and to see that he's no longer living. And so I just ran around in circles. I finally decided I'm just going to open up the balcony doors and call for help. And I realized I didn't know how to say help. So I just started yelling help in English. And it was so surreal because I was just seeing happy families just for the beach. The sun is shining. It's a perfect day. And meanwhile, it's like hell going on for me. The neighbors below, they came running up, led by this teenage girl. And it was her mother, and her aunt might have been there, but I'm so foggy on those details. But I know for sure her and her mother were there. And she'd seen us at the restaurant the night before. There was live music, nobody was dancing. He pulled my hand and we were dancing. We were the only ones dancing there. She was at the same restaurant. And we had a strange synchronicity because I found out later I knew her sister. Her sister lives in Miami. It was just a very strange scenario. But she spoke perfect English, so she was able to help me. They called the paramedics and then they're just trying to help me calm down because I was in a state of shock, really. So that was really so helpful that they were there. And then I had to start making phone calls, which was just terrible. So I decided I was going to still stay in Europe. Half the people thought that was a great idea. The other half thought it was crazy, but I was just like, I wasn't happy in Miami and now to go back. And that's our city. Every corner is going to remind me of him. A lot of people won't even know that he's passed away. So every time I bump into somebody, they're going to ask me how he's doing. And it's just like, it was just too much. So I decided to stay there and it helped because he was Orthodox Christian. And so there are a lot of traditions a few days after the funeral and then 40 days later. So I got to be there with his family and some of our friends for those occasions. But yeah, those first couple of years were just so dark. It looked like I was living after a while, but the grief, it was doing so much behind the scenes. I never really processed it because I was so young when it happened. I'd never meditated or any of those things. I had no tools. Anytime something stressful happened, dramatic, you just keep moving forward, that kind of situation. And then our identities, I feel like they're so intertwined and all of our plans for the future. I got to a point where I was like, okay, I feel like I'm in a good spot. But I didn't realize I had all this unresolved grief working in the background. And I started having one food allergy after another. I started having different food sensitivities. I started having other health issues. And everything was not something that you could just go to the doctor and then they're going to find a way to fix you. Everything was something complicated and chronic. So the good news now that I'm on the other side of that, I could say I'm grateful for those health challenges because that set me off on this journey to try and figure out how to fix this because I knew it was emotional. I didn't realize so much of that, though, was tied to Boris passing. I didn't realize that I'd just gone underground. So I started doing every modality you could think of. Yoga, I went to the Amazon plant medicine retreats. I tried everything, and everything would kind of help. I might do like a Tibetan healing session. My eyes are like sparkling, there's more vitality. And then after 2 weeks, it's just back to flat. And I just knew it didn't make sense. There was a point where I was feeling like I wanted to move back to the States. So it was like 6+ years in Europe, and I decided to try LA. So when I moved to LA, just the change of scenery, I was already able to eat some of the foods I had sensitivities towards. And I started noticing some patterns. Like, I had a friend who also lived in LA, and I would realize, oh my gosh, when I go to restaurants with people who know about the food allergies, it's setting up the stage for this to be more of a thing. Because I sit down, the waiter asks, do you have any allergies? I try and answer pretty discreetly, but then she's giving a whole story for the whole table. Do you know what happens with this? And everybody's like, oh my God. And I realized this is not helping the situation. Started noticing little things, but I didn't get that full pattern.
Are you saying that where you were mentally and where you were emotionally was really affecting your allergic responses to different foods?
So this is the part that I found out. Yes, the emotions created those health challenges, but that dynamic, like with the server at the table, I didn't know that I'd had a victim mindset and that I'd had it long before he passed away. But that was so shocking and such a why me, why us scenario. It really cemented it for me. So,
Okay, I really want to stop you there and go a little deeper into this victim mindset,
Sure.
because I think so many people can identify with that.
Yeah.
I talk about in my show how we all have lenses that we see the world through, and they come from way back from childhood, a lot of beliefs and experiences that really create the whole viewpoint we have. And so many people don't ever really know how much that is affecting them in their day-to-day life. But it sounds like for you, at a young age, that you were able to really see that victim mindset. Can you expand on that, what that feels like?
Oh, it was just so much harder than it had to be. And I just didn't realize that because there is the reality of the things that were happening in my 3D or that I was surrounded by in my 3D environment. But then also the sob stories I had connected to them. It's so obvious now to me in hindsight, but I didn't realize that I carried it everywhere with me. And it became like subconsciously, I would just bring up these stories, like victim stories, because people really gravitated towards them and they connected. So it wasn't even like for attention because it wasn't even a conscious decision. It's just like I meet people, it's like, oh, you know, what do you do, where you're from? And it's like 5 minutes later, somehow we're in some sob story, but people gravitated towards the stories. Meanwhile, I didn't know what those stories were doing to me because I was keeping myself in this victim mentality. And sure, there are like difficult things that happen in my life, but so many wonderful things happen. Why wasn't I focusing on those things? And meanwhile, you know, and other people, they gravitated towards those stories for different reasons. Sometimes it's just like exciting. They're like, that's terrible, but nothing ever interesting happens in my life. That could even just be it. And I'd be there having this conversation and not realizing what that would be doing to my immune system, what that would be doing to my thought process, to my emotions. And it's strange because, you know, I think in Western society, it's kind of encouraged in many ways for us to act like victims, to feel like victims. I think entitlement is a widespread problem we have. People don't usually say, well, don't look at the situation that way because you're putting yourself in a victim position. I don't think that's usually the case. And I do think that's one reason why so many of us have a victim mindset, because we look at it as normal, like, oh, poor me that this thing happened.
Do you have any idea where it came from initially? Like, why do you think you had this identity so deep?
Yes, I do. That's something I've never talked about on a podcast and I won't. But yeah, it's something out of my childhood. So it just went way, way back. And I think like most people's victim mindsets, that it actually does start from an actual scenario and which one was actually a victim in some shape or form. So I don't want to gloss over that fact, right? But then it starts to seep into all the areas of our lives. So it can start to be like feeling like a victim in traffic, feeling like a victim with an employer or, a client. And then there's just like no end to it.
Love traffic because it brings up so much emotion for people, and it's so true. It's like, I'm a victim. There are 100 people also waiting in this line, but I am the victim, and a lot of us have been there. It's just such a classic example of how the victim can come out.
Why are they driving that slowly in front of me? Don't they know I have somewhere to go?
So tell me
yeah.
how when you had the moment of realization that this is how you've been living, how were you able to begin to change?
So those scenarios in the restaurants, I was starting to see the clues, but the most aha moment with the victim mindset was a few years after moving to LA. It was the end of a romantic relationship. And that friend who was at the restaurant was lamenting the end of the relationship, how it ended. And I went home, I went to sleep, and the next day I woke up and I thought, oh my God, this friendship has the exact same dynamics as that romantic relationship I was in. So I called the friend, I was like, you have to change or our friendship's over, I can't do this. And I realized I'd chosen people, the two people I spent the most time with in my life, to be people who would keep me in a victim mindset. That's when I finally saw that full picture. And it was so jarring. I won't gloss over that. It can be really uncomfortable to see these things about ourselves. But also I was like, how did I not see that for so many years? So once I got over the initial shock, it was very empowering.
Saw it in the context of the relationships. That's really interesting because that is something I feel like takes a lot of awareness, like self-awareness, to actually see yourself in a relationship and how you're contributing to it. That must have been a very big moment for you.
Really life-changing and uncomfortable. I was just like, wait, how did I let that go on for so long? And I don't think it's uncommon, like just to kind of allude to some of the dynamics of that friendship, which is a very long friendship and a very toxic friendship. And people would literally pull me aside and say, how are you friends with this person? And I'd say, oh, you don't know her. And I would reference like wonderful things like her being there. Our friendship started when shortly after my boyfriend passed away, her mother introduced us and she had a similar situation happening. So we kind of bonded through that whole thing. So she was like family to me, but I would reference all these older moments of her being wonderful and people would be like, oh my God, they'd want to run away from her. She's kind of a bully. And I realized I just would make excuses for everybody. But now I realized subconsciously my self-love was at a low and I didn't realize it, Everything just kind of shook up after that grief and I didn't rebuild any of it. And then, just feeling like a victim. If you feel like a victim, you can't surround yourself with loving people all day long. It was wonderful because it wasn't easy to end the friendship. It was right after ending that romantic relationship and life was just kind of like, whoa, a lot of unknowns here. But it was so freeing. And now the concept of drama is so foreign to me. Before I was constantly witnessing drama. There was always drama around me. And now it's just like, what is that even? My friends now, we just don't have that.
I always think of that analogy where you're in the elevator and like say I lived most of my life on the 3rd floor, but then I did a lot of work on myself and healed a lot of my thinking and feelings, and all of a sudden the elevator goes up and I go out and I'm on like the 7th floor and it's a completely different group of people. The people on the 7th floor do not connect with the people on the 3rd floor. They're just different. They're in a different place and there's less, for me too, less drama, less jealousy, less like wasted time with drama, basically.
Yeah. And it changes, as we change, all of our relationships change, right? So like even complicated family dynamics, they just automatically and organically improved.
They did.
And even I had those people and they realized what was happening. And then really long friendships I've had 20 something plus years. We somehow even got even closer. So I think it's really, as we change, either we're going to repel and people who need to leave our lives, that's what will happen. But other people, our relationships can become deeper.
I want to dive a little deeper into that change that you made in your life, because I think it's so empowering to see that you could do that. You could go from having this victim mindset and this extremely painful, traumatic experience, and then to become someone else. Can you share a little bit? Is this the content of your book, Dream On? Is this what you're telling the story of?
Yeah, so that was one big piece, that victim mindset. And then, at this point, I'd already been meditating for almost 10 years, and I started doing these like exercises where I realized the self-love piece was not there. I realized I say I love myself, and I always talk about self-love, and I've read wide and deep on these subjects. But how could I love myself and decide to surround myself with people who would keep me in this dynamic? So I just realized like how that was another jarring one, but it was great. I had these two important pieces of information, and they were pillars that really set me on my way. And now we're at 10 years actually of meditating. And I made it just like a full-time job outside of my business. I felt like I just had to figure this out. Like I cannot spend more time doing all of these things to heal, you know, emotionally on a soul level, etc., but not really moving the needle. And so I was spending so much time on this, and I was determined to figure it out. Then somebody asked me if I want to go to Dr. Joe Dispenza retreat. I didn't even know he did retreats. I knew him from this documentary he did many years ago, What the Bleep Do You Know? And I said, sure, I've been meditating forever. My family was like, yeah, this is very different, these kinds of meditations. So I was like, all right, I'll try and see if I like it. And I did the first one I tried, I think it was Space, Time, Time, Space. And I remembered I laughed because he does these voice effects, which are really great for helping to change the brainwave states faster. But I laughed because I was like, this is like ridiculous. Like, what are the voice effects? And then I disappeared. I had never had such a deep, profound meditation up until that point. And I was just like, when I was done, I was like, what is this? So I agreed to go to the retreat, and I signed up for the retreat in Denver 2023. And it was just really amazing because as somebody who meditated for an entire decade, I was like, I felt like I'd never meditated at all. It was just very different, much more advanced. And so that ended up being my main modality. And I mean, like sometimes 3-4 hours a day I was meditating because I was just like, it was so jarring to me to not have seen the self-love and the victim mindset dynamic. And they were so obvious to me in hindsight. So I was like, no, we're figuring this out. So I was doing that, EFT tapping, and really just moving all these layers away. And I really feel like those are the two biggest points of my change in my life. Figuring out the victim mindset and the self-love piece, and then just going deeper on the journey. Now I don't meditate as much unless I'm at a retreat, but it's just become my life, you know, it's just become my second nature. And I remember the day that I came home and I realized that I was just feeling so amazing. I'd been doing these meditations a lot, and I'd already figured out the self-love and victim mindset piece. I got home and I was just on cloud nine, and I realized, oh my gosh, I just stepped outside of that cloud of grief after all those years. And my next thought was, I have to write a book because nobody should have to spend that much time in it. In the beginning, oh my gosh, it took me that long. I didn't know. And then I got over it because if it didn't take me that long, I think it was supposed to take that long. I was supposed to write this book. And it's a common trap after something difficult happens that we're like, okay, I think I'm feeling good now. But then we start dreaming smaller and shrinking back and lowering our standards and not realizing it because we're afraid to lose so much. It was such a painful loss.
So you wrote the book after you felt the grief start to let go.
Grief was a huge turning point, yeah. So after the victim mindset realization and the self-love piece, I was just really thriving. I'd reversed everything except, I suppose, I have one food allergy left. My body has one food allergy left. I can still eat those things sometimes and nothing will happen. So I know it's on its way out. Everything else is gone. Several allergies. That relationship that ended, during that relationship, I remember the moment my body started having a tendonitis in my hand. I remember the conversation I was having. I was not using my voice. And it's really funny because my hand, which is connected to the fifth energy center, which is connected to the throat, it was just really painful. I went to doctors. They wanted to operate. I said, no way. And then I found out the operations are usually not good for that. They don't have good outcomes. And it ended up being painful, chronic tendonitis in the hands as a writer for 5 years. I tried everything. Nothing worked. A Thai massage might give me a few days of relief. Physical therapy. So I stopped trying to treat that completely. And that went away just from doing this work, just from meditating and recognizing when the victim thoughts would come back in. Because when you are feeling good and you open a jar of pasta and your hand hurts, your brain you start to catch your thoughts. You're like, I can't this, I can't that. And I just thought, no matter how painful it gets, no matter how much work I have to do, I'm not going to complain. I'm going to trust it's going to go away.
The part that's really jumping out for me listening to your story too is that I don't think that I've heard anyone really connect the victim mindset and self love in a way that you are, which I think is so important because I think that when someone's in the victim mindset, in their mind, they feel that is self love because, oh, poor me. Like going, oh, poor me, I can't do that. Can you explain a little bit more how these two things are connected or how they're so different or the way it feels to be in the two different worlds?
Yeah, it's not loving to have a victim mindset. That's not self love because to be a victim is to give away your power. And it's to say that you are just at the mercy of the world around you. So even now, there was a construction issue, renovations in my building a few months ago, and I had to leave for a month because toxic fumes were coming in here. And my friend said, objectively, you are a victim in this circumstance. I said, nope. I said, there's a thing happening. I will never be the victim. Like, there's a circumstance happening outside of my control, and I'm gonna figure it out. But I won't. I reject the title because it's so disempowering, and it's just, there's so many circumstances outside of our control, but it's really profound the power we have with our mindsets, our perspectives, the way we decide to think and feel, regardless of the things that are happening in our lives. And I wouldn't give that up for anything. So it is not loving to have a victim mindset.
And how would you describe the difference that you feel now with the self love being such a focus and how different the world is to you versus what it was when you were living with the victim mindset?
It's so relaxing. I look and feel younger than I did when this happened in my 20s. So to look and feel younger than you did 10 years ago, it's just from feeling happy, you know, just even the way I laugh and everything, there's a sparkle there. And I just like, it's so freeing. And I think we see it a lot of times with like very elderly people. You know, my grandmother, she's 101. And a little bit after her 90th birthday, she was just more and more relaxed. So many things she was like, very just proper standards. So she'd be very strict about certain things. And she doesn't care about them anymore. She says stuff like, it's just important that you're happy. You know, are you happy? And she just giggles like a child. And she'll even realize it's like a child and she'll make a joke about that. And it's like this really sparkly effect in her eyes. And I realized we don't have to wait until we are further along in our timelines to get there. Like there's so much that we start to carry over the years. I call them barnacles, and we just collect them. And that's how I was able to be under the weight of my victim mindset back then, under the weight of whatever stress was happening. I was just carrying it all. I remember at that time, that was in my mid to late 20s. And I remember I would see girls in their early 20s when I'd go out or something, and I'd see them feel so happy and free. And I would think, oh, I remember when I was that young and oh, I could be that happy, as if that was their phase. And it's really funny just seeing we can just let all that stuff go. There's so much baggage. It doesn't mean that the things that we've experienced in life were any less difficult, but it's not doing anybody any justice to carry these things around.
So I want to make sure I'm hearing you correctly, but you're saying like when you're in this new place of self-love, you're letting it go. You're letting the barnacles go.
Yeah, and I definitely don't dwell in the past. And to me, I felt like I had to keep dwelling on the past because, like, all right, for example, to honor Bodo's life, I have to dwell on the past. But that's not true. Because, you know, I look at it as like, okay, if energy can't be created or destroyed, he's not in the past. So that relationship was in the past and his passing was in the past. So I can still focus on the present and the future and still honor him. I don't have to wallow through circumstances.
I have a question about any advice you could give our listeners if they are identifying really deeply with what you're saying about knowing on some level that they live with this victim mindset. Do you have any tips to offer?
A big thing that I couldn't believe I wasn't seeing, but this should help, is to notice where in your life you're showing up and it feels exhausting or frustrating or like something you don't want to do, a scenario or even spending time with certain people, and you are chiding yourself internally, like, oh, I should not feel frustrated. I should feel good about spending time with these people. That to me was a big realization, because like, oh, why was I trying to convince myself every time I was going to see my boyfriend at the time, like, oh my God, why am I suddenly not feeling great? Why am I suddenly feeling this burden? A lot of feel like, oh, I should feel better about this. I should feel better about that. Those shoulds are dangerous, you know? We're trying to force something when everything, our intuition, everything, you know, we've probably been ignoring for a while. So the signals get a little bit dulled, but everything's telling us to do something different, to make a different choice. But we're like, I need to show up dutifully in whatever the situation is. A friendship, a bad job, you know, whatever it is.
So that the shoulds are connected with the victim.
Oh, yeah. It's kind of like a martyr situation. It's, well, I'm good. This is my role, and I must show up. Doesn't matter if it's difficult. And that's just not okay. And so part of what helped me in the self-love journey was to keep thinking about myself as a child, you know, like as for inner child work. I'm carrying a picture with me of when I was like 3 years old and thinking, what about her? Who's going to advocate for her? And when you think of that all the time, like we're still that person, you know? No matter who we have in our lives, no matter how wonderful they are. Look, Bodo passed away, then he was gone, right? So it's like, if I'm not going to be there for me, what does that mean? Who's going to be there for me? And what does that mean about what my relationship with myself is? And if I won't show up for me, how can I expect others to show up well in my life for me?
Such a sweet story and reminder about the thought and image of all of us looking at ourselves as a little child. Because deep inside, we are there.
We are. And as a society, I love how much we cherish children in this society. But I think about the way we speak about children and even pets, and then we're like adults, we kind of throw ourselves out the window. And I think it's really important to think, if we love children so much, why do we then turn a cold shoulder, or we just like hard, bitter truths for life when they're adults?
An interesting, really enlightening story you're sharing, and so much information. I know listeners are going to want to learn more and dive deeper. So can you share a little bit about how can they find your book?
Sure, you can find everything on my website. It's shanoainez.com, ChanoaInez.com.
I just want to thank you so much for being so candid and sharing such a profound journey that you've had, and so much wisdom with us today. And I can't wait for people to hear the story. And I'm going to read your book.
Thank you. It's been great to be here.
Thank you so much.